When my mom died, it felt like someone had reached in and shut the lights off on the entire planet. I'd only just turned 26 and was busy mapping out a life with my fiancé, Mason, wedding ideas, weekend plans, the comforting kind of routines that make you believe the hard parts are behind you. We were living a short walk from the street where I grew up, close enough that my childhood still felt within reach. For a while, everything seemed to be lining up the way it was supposed to. Then the phone rang in the darkest part of the night. My dad didn't ramble or soften it. His voice shook so badly it sounded like it might break apart in his throat. And he managed only a couple of words before silence swallowed the rest. She's gone. After that, time turned syrupy and strange. The funeral came and went like a half-remembered dream. Faces I knew and faces I didn't. Arms around my shoulders, murmured sympathy, dishes dropped off in foil pans like kindness could be portioned and reheated. I can still picture the graveside service more clearly than anything else. My hand locked around my father's, his fingers clenched so hard it hurt, as if loosening his grip might mean losing her all over again. She had been his first love. They'd been together since they were kids, married for more than 3 decades. Watching him stand there without her felt unreal, like seeing a familiar photograph with one person carefully cut out. In the days and weeks afterward, I started showing up at his house constantly. At first, it was practical, making sure there was food in the fridge, reminding him to drink water, checking that he'd slept at all. But soon it became more than that. I'd sit with him in the quiet, measuring his mood the way you check a fever. Without meaning to, I slipped back into old habits, running a load of towels, wiping down counters, straightening piles of mail. I was tidying the way I used to when I lived there, as if keeping the place in order could keep something else from coming undone. Nothing in the house looked different, and that was the worst part. The same furniture, the same framed photos, the same familiar creaks in the floorboards. Yet it felt vacant, like a building that still stands after a fire, intact on the outside, but emptied of what made it home. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after we buried her, I arrived with bags of groceries. I was putting things away, shifting cartons and produce into their usual spots when my father stepped into the kitchen. He didn't move like he normally did. He paused in the doorway, shoulders set, expression heavy with something I couldn't read. "Alina," he said, and the way he used my full name made my stomach tighten. The voice reserved for serious conversations and hard truths. "I need to ask you something. I'll keep the same first-person, emotional storytelling tone, but I'm going to reshape the scenes, dialogue, and sentence structure so it reads like a wholly new passage while preserving the meaning and escalation." I turned toward him, confused by the way he was standing there, like he'd been rehearsing something and still didn't know how to say it. "What is it, Dad?" He didn't answer right away. He stared past me for a second, jaw tight, then finally said, "I want you to come back here, stay for a bit." I blinked. "Come back? Move in? Why?" "You and Mason." I started, already thinking about our place, our plans, the life I'd just begun building. He lifted a hand, stopping me with a softness that somehow made it heavier. I know about you two." His voice dropped. "It's just, this house is unbearable right now." He exhaled, shaky and thin. "It's too quiet. I don't sleep. I eat by myself. I wake up and there's no one next to me." His eyes looked glassy, but it wasn't just tears. There was a hollowed-out kind of exhaustion in them, a loneliness so sharp it startled me. I hadn't even seen that look at the funeral. My throat tightened. I stared at the linoleum because looking at him felt like it would split me open. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I'll do it, but only for a little while." That night I sat down with Mason and told him everything. He listened, patient, but I could see the worry underneath his calm. "It's a brutal season," he said carefully. "If being there helps him get through it, I'm not going to stand in the way." Then he touched my hand and added, quieter, "Just promise me you won't disappear into it, Jess. Help him, but don't drown with him." A day later, I was hauling a small suitcase up the front steps of the house I'd spent my whole childhood trying to outgrow. My room looked frozen in time. Old band posters still hung crooked on the walls, corners peeling. The bed felt too short, the mattress bowed in the middle, but the familiarity wrapped around me anyway. Like the past had been waiting with the door open. At first, it was almost okay. I made dinner. We ate at the table instead of in front of the TV. We watched old shows, and once or twice, my dad actually laughed. Quick, surprise bursts, like his face had forgotten how to do it and was trying to remember. Those moments gave me hope. I told myself this was the point of being here, to pull him back toward something normal. Then the requests started. The first one seemed harmless. Late one evening after we'd turned off the lights, he hovered near the hallway and asked, "Can you just sit with me for a while? In the living room, until I fall asleep." I hesitated. "You want me to stay up?" "Just a little," he said, eyes down. "The house doesn't feel so empty when you're in it." It didn't strike me as wrong at the time. Grief makes people cling to whatever steadies them. So I sat on the couch, listening to the clock tick until his breathing from the recliner evened out. But the next night, he didn't ask for company. He asked for something else. "Could you wear your mom's robe?" he said, like it was a normal favor. "The blue one." I stared at him. Why would I do that? His expression didn't change, only softened into something I couldn't place. "Because you look like her in it," he said. "Just for tonight." A cold, uneasy feeling slid under my ribs. Still, I tried to explain it away. He was lonely, he was raw. People say and do strange things when reality cracks, when their minds reach for anything that makes the pain quieter. I told myself not to judge a man whose whole world had been cut in half. And then there was the night I walked into the kitchen and stopped dead. He was standing at the counter with something white draped over his hands, one of my mother's nightgowns. His back was to me, shoulders shaking as if he was trying not to make noise. For a moment, I thought he hadn't heard me. Then he turned slowly, clutching the fabric like it was fragile. His eyes met mine, glossy and distant at the same time. "You remind me of her," he said, barely above a whisper. "So much." His mouth trembled. Sometimes I act like she's still here." The air in the room felt thick. My skin prickled. I couldn't tell where grief ended and something else began. But I knew all at once that this wasn't the kind of help I'd imagined giving. His eyes shone with that wet, distant look people get when they've cried so much they've run out of tears. I stood there, caught between instincts, one telling me to wrap my arms around him, the other screaming to get out of the room. I chose the version of myself that still believed this was grief talking. I stepped closer, offered comfort, said the steadying words you say when someone is breaking. But once I went back to my room, my thoughts wouldn't stop circling. Was this what loss could do to a person? Bend them into someone unrecognizable? Or was I watching him tip into something darker, something that didn't right itself with time? A few nights later, the doubt stopped being theoretical. We were at the table eating dinner, nothing special, just spaghetti and meatballs, the kind of meal you make when you're too tired to think. The house was quiet except for the scrape of forks and the faint hum of the refrigerator. My dad took his time, spreading butter across his bread in slow, careful strokes. He didn't look up until he'd finished, like he was buying himself a few more seconds. "I've been thinking," he said. Relief rushed through me before I could stop it. "Yeah?" I tried to sound casual, but hope crept into my voice. "That's good, Dad. Mom wouldn't want you stuck in this forever." He nodded, almost to himself. "I know." Then he added, measured and calm, "But I don't mean moving on with someone new." My smile faltered. "Okay," I said, unsure. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on mine. "I mean, I want someone who already gets me, someone who understands this place, someone who knows how I live, someone who knows me." My confusion sharpened into unease. "What are you saying?" He reached across the table and took my hand, gently, like it was a simple, natural thing. The contact sent a jolt through me. His fingers didn't move away. "I want you to stay," he said, voice low. "Not just as my daughter." He swallowed. "As my partner." Everything in me went cold. For a split second, I tried to make the words mean something else. Anything else. Like he'd misspoken. Like grief had tangled his thoughts, and he'd say, "I'm sorry," and laugh bitterly, and it would evaporate into a nightmare I'd imagined. But the way he watched me didn't leave room for confusion. The pause he held, the quiet expectation in his face, the way his hand lingered as if he had a right to it. I ripped my hand back so fast my chair scraped the floor. I did, I admitted, because I was scared, because I didn't recognize what was happening. He swallowed hard, and when he finally lifted his head, his eyes were wet, not glassy and distant, but present, ashamed. "You're right," he whispered. "I've been lost." His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't know how to sit in it. I didn't know how to be here by myself. I exhaled, shaky. "Then let someone help you who's trained for this." He nodded once, a small motion, a surrender. I packed my suitcase with hands that wouldn't stop trembling and drove back to Mason like I was fleeing a storm. At our place, the silence felt different, safer. I crawled into bed and slept so deeply it felt like my body was trying to erase the last month from my skin. When I woke up, I cried. Not from fear, not exactly, but from grief, layered with something harder to name. Because in a way, I had lost two parents, one to death, and one to a kind of desperation that hollowed him out from the inside. The weeks that followed were slow and careful. Dad started therapy. He joined a grief support group. We talked, but I kept a deliberate distance. Phone calls instead of long visits. Coffee in public places instead of afternoons alone in that house. Boundaries like railings on a steep staircase. And gradually, he began to come back to himself. He replanted the garden where Mom used to kneel in the dirt with her gloves and her sun hat. He started cooking again, simple things at first, then meals that took actual effort. He mentioned names from the group, people who understood the strange, private loneliness of loss. He still missed her. That didn't disappear. But the house stopped being a shrine, and I stopped being the thing he tried to use to keep the past alive. It wasn't a clean recovery, and it didn't happen all at once. But it was movement, and for a while that was the only thing that mattered. For me, the biggest lesson was how grief doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it's warped and restless. Sometimes it twists logic, rearranges memories, and convinces you that what's happening is normal if it means the pain quiets down for a minute. I learned how easily loss can blur the edges of reality, how it can bargain, disguise itself, and pull people into patterns they'd swear they'd never fall into. But I learned something else, too. Love isn't only staying. Real love, the kind that's honest and protective, sometimes looks like stepping back. It looks like boundaries. It looks like a firm no, even when your voice shakes. It looks like leaving, not to punish someone, but to keep both of you from breaking in the same place. I still see my dad once a week. We talk about Mom, we trade stories that make us laugh, and sometimes the kind that leave both of us quiet for a while. Every now and then we cry, and it doesn't feel like failure anymore. It just feels human. But we don't revisit that moment. We never name it. We never open that door again. Some things don't need to be processed out loud to be understood. Some boundaries, once pushed too far, can't be reset by pretending they didn't move. You don't uncross certain lines. You only choose, over and over, not to approach them again. And still, healing can happen anyway. Not perfectly, not neatly, but genuinely, even after everything.